Welcome everybody, and sorry I can't be there this evening, but on behalf of Funding for Sport and Heart Sports Partnership, I welcome you to the presentation on funding. What I would like to do as part of this presentation is just to introduce myself, Richard Sutcliffe. I'm the Director of Funding for Sport, and we do lots of things in terms of supporting clubs, which I'll talk about at the end in terms of accessing funding. In terms of this presentation this evening, I just want to concentrate on three areas. Funding streams for sports clubs that you can apply to, and that'll take up the majority of today's presentation. And then just finish off with some funding hints and tips, and then also helping people just to find out where they can actually find more information available on funding, hopefully to help your clubs bring in some income that's probably much needed at the moment. So I'm going to concentrate first of all on small funding streams. And the first one is the National Lotteries Awards for All. This is a really good scheme for sports clubs because you can get anywhere between £300 and £10,000. The turnaround's pretty good. It was much sort of shorter turnaround earlier in the year, but at the moment there is high demand. So you're looking at about sort of 10 to 14 weeks turnaround on your application. Now, because the lottery is a community fund, they have three priorities. And you only have to hit one of those priorities, but it is important that you do hit one of those. And these are either bringing people together and building strong relationships in and across communities. And obviously as sports clubs, that's something that you do day in, day out by bringing people into your club, where people make strong social connections with each other, maybe go off and do other things outside the sport, and in many cases become lifelong friends. So that's certainly something as sports clubs we do. And I'm sure any project that you would look to do would have some element of that. Improving places and spaces that matter to communities. If you're a club that may have your own building or lease a building and I want to improve facilities within that place, whether that's indoor, such as a new kitchen, toilets, disability access, or whether that's improvements outside of your club, then again, you're going to hit that priority. And then again, finally, enabling more people to fill their potential by working to address issues at the earliest possible stage. It might be as a club that you work in an area where there's problems with antisocial behaviour, and by you engaging young people in positive activities through your sport, that's keeping them off the street, or it's keeping them away from gangs, or it's just keeping them actually doing something where they can find out that it's actually something that they're very good at, and then from there go on and do better. It could actually be that you're working with specific groups, for example, people with disabilities or older people, and by doing that, you're enabling them to sort of help their condition, but also, again, helping them to maybe create social networks that will have impacts on their confidence and self-esteem and independence, which again will enable them to go off and reach their potential. So what can be funded? So I'm not going to go through them all, but as you can see, there's a wide breadth of things that this funding will fund. So anything from qualifications through to paying coaches to come in, paying for venue hire or buying equipment, putting people through training courses, marketing and promotion. So good breadth of things that they can fund. And obviously there are things that they won't fund. So they don't like funding things. For example, if you're looking to raise 250,000 towards a big refurbishment or an extension on a building, they're not going to look to what they like to be sort of one of the bigger funders in a piece of work. So if it's a case of 10,000 towards 250,000, they prefer not to contribute to that because they're not sure whether you'll raise the rest. Whereas actually, if you pick elements off that, so I talked before, say about improvements to a kitchen, that might be part of your bigger refurbishment work. I would just focus on the kitchen element of it and then ask for, say, 10,000 towards that. They won't fund anything that's to do with school curriculum. They will fund after school, but it's a bit of a grey area. And so personally, I suggest people avoid anything that's to do with schools or mentioning schools, because they just feel that schools can get money through other sources, and that the school should prioritise that themselves and fund it rather than themselves, which are more community and wanting to fund things outside of school hours. One of the important things to note there at the bottom, however, is you have to talk about the impact it has on the people rather than talking about your sport. I can sometimes write applications for sports clubs and not even mention the sport because they're really keen on the impact it has. And if they feel actually you're doing it for sport's sake, then the lottery is more likely to decline your application. So focus on the people and less on your sport. And there's just some ideas to give you in terms of how you can make, a really strong application there. So I talked about the first one, but also highlight the wider issues the community are facing. So again, I talked earlier about it could be situations in the community where there's sort of antisocial behaviour. So that might be something where you focus on that as a community issue, or there could just be that actually there's nothing affordable for people to participate in sport, and by this project you'll be allowed to offer something maybe for free where normally you'd have to charge a membership or subscription, which would deter people. Obviously, as a club long term, you then hope to keep those people and that they enjoy the sport that much that they then see the value in it and are willing to pay, even if that's at a reduced fee. And again, as a lottery, very community focused. They like to see things that are people led. So if they feel that you're doing it to the community, i.e., we want to do this project and it'll benefit the community by doing it, they're less keen as if you were able to say, actually, we've done some consultation, or we had a small focus group, so we held a meeting, or we just talked to people informally from the community, and they say, we would love to have a go at this sport, but never felt we had an opportunity to, or actually we don't use your facility for birthday parties or other community activities because your kitchen facilities are quite poor, or you've not got accessible toilets for people with disabilities. So they do like it when it's people led. And again, if you're unsure in terms of whether it's something that they will fund, then the website is excellent. So visit the website, or you can contact them via their telephone line or general inquiries if you've got any queries. So the next one, which is another small grant, is the Sport England's Queen's Platinum Jubilee Activity Fund. Now, this actually opened earlier in the year to mark and help celebrate the Queen's Jubilee by supporting projects that bring the community together by providing opportunities for those that are less active. The fund aims to use sport and physical activities of tackling inequalities, and therefore the priority is to support people more from disadvantaged communities. Now, because of that, you'll see on the third bullet point, they're wanting to fund people from areas 1 to 3 deciles, which basically means the 30% most deprived areas. And it's important that Sport England are really keen that your organisation is based within those communities. So it's a bit of a tricky one. But if you are in a community where you support that community, but your club isn't in that community, they won't fund it. So you need to be sort of within that community in the first place, your actual location of your club, for you to be able to apply to that. But if you can, again, it offers up to £10,000. So it's again a really good sort of fund to go for. Some additional things to consider. They like things which add value to the local community and that you sort of working with local groups to maximize the project's impact. That could be through them helping you to promote it. It could be working in partnership with them because they work with a specific group that would benefit, or there could be an organisation that could help its sustainability. At the moment, there's no deadline. I expect it'll carry on till the end of the year. And then I think probably next year it'll return to Sport England's normal small grant scheme. At the moment, turnaround is good, sort of 3 to 4 weeks. And there's some examples, quite similar to the lottery, really, apart from anything that's capital based. So they'll fund facility hire, coaching, volunteer expenses, marketing, promotion, equipment, as well as small capital improvements. So, for example, if a trampoline club wanted a trampoline, boxing club wanted a boxing ring, but nothing on bigger scales. So if you're actually wanting something along the lines of a new mobile cricket net or something like that, which might be about 8,000 or 9,000, that would be deemed too big. So you can find more about the fund there. And also, again, if you're unsure, the website, email, and helpline are all very good and will steer you in the right direction in terms of if this is a project for yourself. Other possible funding streams, again, I won't go through all of those, but there's quite a few others that are good for sort of clubs to go for. Usually finding that these grants are more towards the sort of 2,000 mark. They can actually take much longer to go from the start till the end, especially the sort of supermarket grants. They can go on for a few years because a lot of them are based on people putting tokens in, or every time they swipe the membership card, so much goes towards your project over 6 months, and at the end of 6 months you get the monies. The Green King IPA one, that's a new one, which is quite a good one. And then also you've got your kind of local council grants, some examples there. But also if you Google sport funding sources, you'll find that many will come up. And sometimes these days the funding streams come and go that quickly. It's a struggle to try and keep up with the funding streams. It's probably actually better to do it that way because you'll get things that are more up to date. Just a sort of thing that cuts across all funders, really. Most small grant funders will expect that you've got at least 3 unrelated people on your governing body, definitely 2. A UK bank account in the organisation's name with at least 2 unrelated signatories, a governance document, so that could be a memorandum of understanding, articles of association if you are set up as a sort of limited company by guarantee, or a club constitution if you're a voluntary club. The key that membership's open to all, so obviously if you're a tennis club, they expect that obviously people that want to be involved are open to people that want to play tennis, but the idea there is that it's not closed off, so people don't say, well, actually, if you don't come from this area, you can't join, or you don't discriminate in any way. And then finally, most of the small grants, certainly those that we've talked about there, expect your grant to be completed within a year from the day that the grant's confirmed. So when you're thinking about your project, just try and think of it on a yearly basis, but also sort of take into consideration that if you ask for £300 and then 6 months later you want to go back and ask for 2,000, you'll have to wait a year before you can go back to the funder. So it's a good job to think of everything you want. If you think, there's a few things that will make up your grant, and then you're not sort of disappointed thinking, oh, I wish we'd have gone for this, and having to wait a year to do so. As well as sort of funding streams, you've also got things like fundraising platforms. So there's things out there like Give to Local, Easy Fundraising, Just Giving. And if it's sponsorship you're looking at, Snap Sponsorship are really sort of good at helping you drive sponsorship. In terms of schools, get a lot of clubs that obviously operate out of schools and wanting to apply for funding to almost improve facilities within school, or things that will actually benefit the school. If things are sort of on school grounds, then the school themselves have to sort of find the funding, and it's really hard at the moment for schools to sort of get funding through any sort of pots that are community based, but they do have specific funds that they can tap into, and A&S Landscapes have a really good guide to sort of successful writing bids, but also a sort of a kind of schools funding list of where they can go to. So if you look at that sort of link there, it's really useful, and it was brought out in January this year, so actually it's quite relevant. Also, you can look at crowdfunding. Sport England have kind of really gone with crowdfunding over the last few years. They had their return to play, which was helping people during COVID. Now they've sort of built on the top of this sort of Birmingham Commonwealth Games with this Places and Spaces Fund, but brought it across the country. And again, this will match up to 10,000 with the idea that it can be invested in revenue and capital projects to help people develop projects, but also, if you like, that clubs are doing quite a bit of work themselves to sort of work hard to match that. And what is really good about the website and the things that crowdfunder have to support this is that they will have lots of information to help you build your campaign. They also offer one-to-one coaching and webinars that help you sort of make sure that your project is going to be good enough, one, to generate as much crowdfunding as you can, but also that on top of that, you can also get as much match as you can from Sport England, and that's where you would go to. So again, it's really sort of good, and they have sort of a system in place where you've got to raise the 25% of the funding before you get a call, if you like, from Sport England to say whether they'll commit to it or not. So it's important that you don't set your target too high, because you never know how much you're going to get from Sport England, but they will match up to 50% up to projects that are 20,000 crowdfunding, and then after that they cap it at 10,000. So we'll move on to capital funding. At the moment, Sport England have a fund called the Community Asset Fund. It's currently closed. It has been closed since COVID. However, there are signs or sort of murmurings coming out from Sport England that this might open before Christmas. So it might change its name. It might be different than what the Community Asset Fund was. But if it's similar, and most of Sport England's capital funding is, it is all about improving and protecting sports facilities that support the need of the local community. There will always, Sport England probably have a little bit of a steer towards supporting underrepresented groups such as women, older people, disabled people, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. However, what you do find with capital funding is that's not always the case. So definitely this is one to sort of keep your eye out for, because if you stick with the Community Asset Fund and how that worked, they had three sort of scales to it. So one was very much around 1 to 15,000 for smaller investment work, whether facilities might have been damaged by floods or by vandals. But the majority of the funding went into that sort of second bullet point, which is the medium scale investments, typically ranging between 15 and 50,000 pounds. And that's either to upgrade or refurbish or put in new facilities within clubs. Really good for things as well, like floodlights, improvements to courts, cricket nets, fixed cricket nets. So really, really good fund if it reopens. And then it was by exception, but they would invest in sort of larger projects as well. But they have to be very bespoke, have to definitely be supporting underrepresented groups. And it might be one that's, you work in partnership with as a big project. But again, very promising times if this does open back up, because clubs have been struggling for capital for a number of years now. Other things to consider: Section 106 monies, community infrastructure levy. So this is for funding for outdoor sport and play using housing developer contributions based on the loss of green space, which is due to changes in land. This is mainly housing. It can be where the supermarkets and other facilities are built, but it's normally housing developments. And funding will vary based on the value and size of the land that's being built on. But they will fund large capital items, and we've known clubs get anywhere from sort of 20,000 up to sort of 800,000. So there's a lot of varying that, and you find out about it by contacting your council's planning department and just asking if there's any Section 106 monies or community infrastructure levy monies. The other thing you can look at is landfill funding. What you tend to find in Hertfordshire, the main two operators are Biffa and Veolia. As you can see, they fund between 10 and 60,000, so it's a good fund to go for. And again, it just at the top there, it explains how it's a tax credit scheme and how it operates. Alongside that, there's obviously sports-specific funding. A lot of the time you will be aware probably of what funding's out there for your sport, but if not, there's just a few on these slides that I've sort of named. I'm not going to go through them all. This presentation and hopefully video will be available for you to watch again anyway. So I've tried to cover a nice breadth of sports. I might have missed some, but just to sort of give you a flavour really of what's out there. And again, if you're looking at Google for things such as specific sports, if you know, one of the best ways to find it is by Googling. So, if you're unsure or you've heard something that might be some funding out for your sport, just do a Google search or contact me and I can point you in the right direction. So just moving on to some funding hints and tips. Again, I won't bore you by sort of going through everything in depth, but just a few things to avoid. try and avoid buzzwords. That funders are quite, aware now that people try and use sort of tricky words and buzzwords to try and get the point across. Just keep it nice and simple. Just tell the funder what you want to do. Don't make any sort of grandiose claims that you're going to change the world. Just be specific that by doing that, that's going to help people from the local community or people within your club to get active, or to use your building more. Don't assume that the assessor knows about your club, your situations, or your needs. You need to explain them and rationalise why you need them, and to do that clearly. Because otherwise, the funders can't fill in the gaps, because sometimes a lot of the funders don't even, they're not from a sports background, so they won't even know certain terms. Don't apply for more money than you need. And funders do like, especially the bigger you go, looking at ways that you can contribute towards that bid. So what can you put into that? And sometimes that could be in kind, such as, you might be able to get a reduced venue hire, or you might go off and do the marketing and promotion, but you desperately need some equipment to deliver your project. And you've been able to raise that either through fundraising or crowdfunding, or just through your club's budget. But funders do like that. Don't rush your application. A lot of funding applications don't have deadlines, so take your time, refine it, get it right. Again, be specific on geographical areas and age groups. The broader you make things with smaller funding, for example, the less chance you've got the funding. So you're best to focus on smaller geographical areas like neighbourhoods or wards than trying to cover a whole borough. And the same goes for sort of age groups, really. Focus on young people or older people or people in the middle ages, rather than saying you're going to try and support everybody from 0 to 100. Don't try to broaden things too much. So just touching on the point above, can somebody that doesn't know your project understand what you're wanting to achieve? And just remember, sometimes the club's not the best applicant. Talked about schools before, maybe they are the best applicant, maybe it's another partner organisation. So just think, when you're doing that, am I the right organisation to apply for this grant? And then just some helpful tips really to help you along the way. Ensure that you meet their requirements of the funders' aims and objectives, because you can talk how great your club is, but if it doesn't fit the aims and objectives, they won't fund it. Be aware of the deadlines. Like I said, many don't, but some do. So if there is a deadline, make sure you submit it well before, because if you miss the deadline, they won't allow you. And a lot of time these days, it's on a funding portal. So if it says it closes at 5 on a Thursday evening, the portal will just shut down and you won't be able to access any application that you've started, for example. Don't start work on your project until you've been granted the funding, because funders won't fund retrospectively. Add your internal funds if you've got some. Check how big the overall pot is. The bigger the pot, the more chance of success. The smaller the pot, you've got more organisations trying to get their hands on that money, the less likelihood you will have of success. Once you've found a potential fund, speak to someone at the organisation and talk to them about your project, and just check if you feel that it's something that they would consider. Make sure you read all the guidance notes and funding criteria. Specifically check that they will fund some of the items that you're wanting funding for. Be clear and concise, try not to waffle, and just make sure that all sections on your form is completed. If not, in a lot of cases, the application form won't send these days. But if not, just make sure everything's completed, and just make sure that the funding contact details that you give are correct. Because if they do want to contact you and you've given them a wrong digit in your email address and they can't get a hold of you, after a while they'll just stop trying, and obviously then you'll just get rejected and have to go through the whole process again. And then finally, just so you know how and where to find information on available funding, there are some really useful sort of either websites or organisations that can guide you in the right direction. Obviously, you've got Heart Sports Partnership that are there on hand to help you, or even just point you in the right direction should you need it. In terms of ourselves, well, we are a funding consultancy, but we specifically work on sports grants, and we can offer you free funding advice. We do one-to-one clinics that We sometimes come to Hertfordshire. We can do it over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, or we can just do it over the phone, where we could just talk specifically about your project and hopefully identify funding sources and guide you in the right direction. We also have a bid writing service, but we do charge for that. But we do that on a no win, no fee. And we've got our website as well, which we keep things up to date. So when we're talking about Sport England capital funding and when that might come out, if you keep going to the sort of website, we're constantly updating any new information just on the front screen. And also there's loads of useful other funding streams and information that you might find useful on there. And then finally, if you've got any other questions or you want to get in touch with me, then obviously you can email me at info@fundingforsport.co.uk, or you can telephone me on that number and we can talk various things through. So I hope you found that useful. And if you've got any more sort of questions, get in touch. And again, sorry I couldn't be there this evening, but all the best.